Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our 7th Chamber City County Connects You teleconference. My name is Tara Doyle-Enneking. I am the CEO of the Puyallup-Sumner Chamber of Commerce. My co-facilitators today are Lori Waltier, our Director of Communications, that will facilitate the Q&A portion of our program, and Hannah Thomas, the Owner Principal Advisor of New Canvas Advising, that has been helpful as the Chamber evaluates our next steps to provide resources to the business community. Today's format will be a little different than previous programs. With Governor Inslee expected to make an announcement tomorrow afternoon, we do not yet know what this first tier of considerations will look like. What we do know is that the business community can proactively take action now to ready their business to reopen safely. So at the Chamber, we are shifting our conversation and focus to a back to work plan. As the champion of business, we take seriously the challenge to be the voice of business and recognize the importance of collaborating with all our community partners. We assembled a task force to explore the best pathways to restarting business in Puyallup and Sumner. This task force included city, county, state, public officials, and representation from both Main Street associations, the South Hill Mall, and Sunrise Village to work together to provide a solution for our region. The Back to Work Task Force met earlier today, and we presented a Back to Work toolkit that we believe is currently the most comprehensive plan for business owners to serve as a grounding to how we can move forward in a manner that employees, consumers, and employers would feel confident with. This actionable toolkit was created from the most extreme public health lens that will be appropriate for all businesses to implement, yet could serve as a foundation for employers to have a template that businesses could then tailor from. We will present that toolkit to you in part today, and you will be provided links to the full Reopening the Workplace video, along with templates that you can tailor to your specific business requirements, with ample room to customize to your comfort level and capacity to implement. Once we review the toolkit and templates, Hannah will speak to some of the other resources that are out there, and we will specifically be referencing resources that will provide you access to PPEs, as that will certainly, in any plan, be something to source for your business now. We will have members of the task force on the line and will be open for questions. Please feel free to use the chat function on Zoom or email Lindsay at admin@puyallupsumnerchamber.com. Lindsay will also be providing links in the chat box as we cover different resources. So let's see if I can do this a little slicker than I did this morning. Technology is always so fun. But I'm gonna go ahead and just dive right into the video. We have sent a link out to this. We have sent a PowerPoint out. I think that the video does a really good job in its intro explaining who was behind this task force, what their intention was for it. And I'll just caution once again, a lot of the recommendations, it's just nice that it's there. It's very comprehensive, and some will want to take those recommendations to the nth degree. Some will just be dictated by whatever the governor deems is what we need to do. And for others, it's just going to be a little bit of picking and choosing what you feel is right for your organization, your comfort level, and your capacity to implement it. So I say that, and we'll start the video here. Look at that.
I'm Tom Alberg, a managing director of Madrona Venture Group, and welcome to this webinar, Reopen Workplace. I know and this is co-sponsored by Madrona and the Seattle Chamber of Commerce and the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce. So welcome people all across the county. I know there's keen interest by all of us in when and how do we go back to work. I shouldn't say work, back to the workplaces, because I suspect that most of you are at work, just remotely. But we're not going to answer the when today. That's really up to our governor, and you read about what he's likely to do and when, as well as I do in the newspapers. There is keen interest, obviously. We have over 700 people registered for this webinar. So I'm going to let our people from Madrona really get into the details of this, but we wanted first to welcome Chris Gregoire, our former governor, She has been working night and day.
Oh, this did this last time.
Gregoire, our former governor, she has been working night and day, literally, to help create a framework for reopening the economy. She is, as I think most of you know, the CEO of Challenge Seattle. Challenge Seattle is made up of 18 CEOs who represent really the largest companies in Seattle and the East Side. It was really a group created just a couple of years ago by Chris with some strong support from Microsoft. And so she and the organization have really stepped up in this crisis and provided a real leadership role. They've, I think, become the town hall of Seattle, hosting. Chris hosts a call every day or two with leading businesses, nonprofits, healthcare leaders, and government leaders, and has really the best leaders around speaking. And so it's been a real way to provide up-to-date, accurate information to everyone. And they've also, Chris Gregoire has taken the lead in developing a framework for reopening the workplace. And that is the context, I think, in which we're working today. But I'd like to introduce Governor Gregoire to say a couple words of their work and where we are in the process. So, Chris?
You bet. Thanks, Tom. And thanks to everyone who's joined the webinar. Thanks to Madrona and the Seattle and Bellevue Chambers for putting this on and for all your great teamwork. Challenge Seattle and the Roundtable have been working now for almost 4 weeks with Boston Consulting, trying to come up with how do we develop business plans to safely reopen our economy here in the state. And we've put together some work groups, not the least of which are some folks who are experts, having reopened themselves in China and elsewhere, to include Microsoft and Starbucks, Boeing right here locally, because what they've done to reopen. We've had a lot of contact with various sized businesses in the region to make sure that we were understanding their unique needs and so on. But our idea was really to make a tool for the entire business community to use as a foundation from which they can tailor their own plans to move forward to reopen. So the #1 challenge for us was to literally have a call and meeting with every single healthcare expert in the region. And so we've met many times now with the Secretary of Health, the King County Public Health officials, the University of Washington, Paul Ramsey, and many others, to include the Hutch. And in each of those meetings, we gave them the opportunity to tell us what were the minimum things that had to be done by virtually any nonprofit, government, or business to really safely reopen. And so we wanted to have the ability to have a plan, implement the plan, monitor the plan, and then have even additional things that we could put on the plate that if in fact the curve went back up again, we could even cinch down more rather than having to go back to the order to stay home. And so we announced that last Thursday and Friday. The governor put out a statement saying it was an excellent start for all businesses. And our hope was what you all have done exactly here today. Our hope was it would serve as a grounding for what was necessary from the public health lens to how we could safely reopen. And so I've seen at least a draft of what you folks have prepared. It is spot on. You have actually heard what we were trying to do with the many voices in the healthcare arena that we listened to make sure that that was possible. So what we were trying to make sure is employees were confident that they could go back to work because every business in the community would have a plan, that the public would be confident that they could go into a business because they knew it would have a plan. And we've given some good information to the governor as to how he can phase in the reopening and what the timelines are in each phase. So that was our effort. You have built on it. You've taken it a whole new level. I can't thank you enough. That is exactly the kind of partnership we need. I am proud of everybody in this community working together, and particularly our public-private partnership. And this effort that Madrona and the two chambers have put together is exactly what will bring us to even more success than what we've been able to achieve by trying to stop the spread of the virus so we can reopen. We want to reopen, but we want to reopen our economy in a way that maintains, and we want to reopen to make sure everybody's healthy. So Tom, thank you for inviting me today. Thanks for your great leadership, and thanks to Madrona and the team there in the two chambers for making this possible.
Well, thank you, Governor, and thank you particularly for really all the incredible leadership that you've shown throughout this, and really brought government and nonprofits and businesses together so that we're united in these efforts. And now I'd like to turn it over to Katie Druckner to lead us through the work plan. Katie?
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Governor. Again, a big thanks to the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber, the Bellevue Chamber, and I also want to mention the Northwest Venture community as a whole that has come together around this. This really is a truly cooperative effort, and we'll make mention of those folks as we go. We do recognize that the concept of reopening can seem perhaps daunting, and our objective today is to offer an actionable toolkit that any business owner that answers many of the detailed questions that we've heard. We have muted everyone, but please feel free to ask questions through the group question and answer tool that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. And we'll try to leave time for questions at the end, but in case we don't, we will be sure to follow up with answers and send those out to registered users. Lastly, please know that all the materials that we're going to go through today, plus others that we will reference, will be made available to you after the webinar. So touching upon some of our guiding principles, the point's been made by Governor Inslee and others that this is about turning a dial, not flipping a switch. And we recognize that means that there's a balance of health considerations to weigh with economic ones. This presentation is not about when to reopen, but it's about how to reopen. And we believe that the more business leaders know the how, it will in turn or when. But above all else, it's important to know that we have a new normal now and a careful path to navigate until a vaccine and widespread testing are available. We still have vulnerable members of our community and a general responsibility to all. What we have heard resoundingly from folks that we have talked to is whenever it is feasible, working from home is the best option. Also, as business leaders, it's our jobs to make employees and customers feel safe. And that for everyone we spoke to, this meant setting a bar often above where the regulation is. Our presentation's goal is to review the practices of that higher bar. So as we talk about our new normal, what I will say is this new normal has shown a humanity in all of us that I've experienced not only in my personal life, but also wonderfully in the work environment as well. It is that humanity that I want to mention for a moment. We would not have this presentation today without the wonderful humanity, empathy, and collaboration of so many in our community. Despite being incredibly busy navigating the unprecedented for some of the largest organizations, everyone here was generous with their time, with their knowledge, and with their experience. And to a single member, each one demonstrated care and concern for a broader whole. We are in this together, really couldn't be truer words. And I want to thank each of you. We are grateful and we look forward to the continued spirit as we all forge ahead. So today's presentation is intended to cover many of the details at a working level, sort of where the rubber hits the road. We are covering the planning, the people, and the physical space of what reopening means. At the end of this presentation, we hope that you will have many of your questions answered, and in addition, we will provide a detailed toolkit that includes templates, training materials, and other examples of best practice documents that we found, that we received, and that we created. Importantly, however, there will still be many questions each of you will likely have for the particulars of your business needs. Coming up with a personalized plan is incredibly important for each of you and your businesses. But getting started now will help go a long way to making reopening a reality. So let's take a look at the process of getting started. So today, many of you are at the starting point of thinking about reopening. This will include assessing your physical space, understanding what needs to be done to support your workers. The availability of the right personal protective equipment or supplies for your workers will be incredibly important, as well as understanding the new rules of engagement that are regularly evolving. In the initial phase of reopening, it's important to understand where your workforce is, who is willing and eligible to return, no matter their roles, and to establish a physical environment with visible evidence for them of the precautions the business is taking. As we turn this dial and bringing back people over a period of time, we will be learning lots, both about COVID as a whole, as well as our new working environments. It is super important that we all stay flexible during these times, including being prepared for a possibility of relapse. Ultimately, though, as we have said, until there is a vaccine and widespread testing, the careful tuning of the dial will be our new normal. Now, I'll pass it to my colleague, Shannon.
Thank you, Katie. Yes, we see companies getting a holistic understanding of their situation at a macro level, all aspects of creating product, services, and delivering to the customer. These companies are asking, what does our business look like right now? What are the priorities for the next 30, 60, 90 days, 6 months, and 2 years? They ask, what people do we need in the office versus working in the field versus working from home in order to make sure that the priorities are nailed? We also know that company leaders who align their values, purpose, processes, and people can overcome anything. There are many examples in history, including many of you on this call today. And when companies have cultural and operational North Star, they can mobilize the entire workforce to rise to the occasion and solve their way through this opportunity to reopen our economy. And speaking of problem solvers, we see companies putting together task forces of really smart, really creative people immersing themselves in getting ready to get back to work. We see these task forces representing cross-functional roles and multi-dimensional aspects of their organizations, their customers, and their people. This is complex stuff. It's not for the faint of heart, but this is truly where the impact can be made. And again, the task force gets everybody swimming in the same direction. All together is truly what we're talking about here. Now, we know that this is not a sprint, and we know it's not a light switch. It's a straight line. We have to recognize that the tides of data and guidance are shifting daily. So it's prudent for us to be data-driven and to let this inform us when it's time to go. There are things that companies are doing to get started. It seems to be that we're going to be doing a lot of iterating. It's definitely not going to be a straight line. So let's talk a little bit about
So I am switching now to the presentation to kind of quickly go through. I, again, wanted to have you listen to the intro. There's a lot of key players that were part of this vision. I'll quickly go through this. By no means am I an expert on implementing it at this point. I'll be bringing Hannah on as well to chime in at any point, but I'll just quickly go through this. But this is the work plan. It's 39 slides. There's a video, and then there's, I think, a dozen or so templates that you'll be able to utilize. So I believe we were a little further here. We can get this to go. This slide wasn't in the video, but I think that that's an important element to this is indicating that creating a task force within your own company is important. And that's going to, be kind of cross-functional employees where some may be performing some of the disinfectant cleaning duties. You may have someone, your landlords will be part of this plan, HR, legal. So just knowing that that in itself is something you should be thinking about is who could be key players in your task force. And also identifying the key data sources would be important as well. She went over some of the different conversations around who comes back and preparing contingency plans for if we had to restart again. They do indicate some of the companies that were consulted during this that have been open and have had, best practices documented. This early, consistent, and transparent communication with employees was deemed the single most important thing to build employees' trust in an employee survey that was produced by this consultant group. So there's a communication component there that you can review. Talks first about preparing the office, so more of the physicality of how you will operate. Of course, PPPs will now become somewhat of a norm. We'll find out what's dictated at the state level, but again, masks, hand sanitizers, antiseptic hand wipes, infrared thermometers, gloves are all part of that picture. And to varying degrees, you will make consideration on what you'll use. That being said, there's suddenly going to be even more of a rush again on PPEs. And so we are working very hard at the Chamber and with our partners to create a database of resources. There is one here, you'll see Best International that's based in Seattle. They have a promo code that's WA Strong, W-A Strong, that identifies you as a state that should get priority over other states ordering from them. Prices seem very reasonable. I also am hoping that Chad from One Sleep will hop on the line today because he's been able to produce, I think, 10,000 masks every, I don't know what. I was told every day. That seems like a lot, but we'll see. But anyway, know that these are important things that this task force is also trying to help solve for you is how can we get this material to you. Facilities and cleaning protocols. Again, this sort of changes also from OSHA requirements on what truly can clean a tough surface. But this particular program had that as the day they presented relevant information. Also, tenant considerations. So your building management should become a close partner with you. Your dialogue should be frequent, specific, and clear. Areas of responsibility should be clearly defined. You should be considering signage, communication throughout your building. What additional cleaning support may need to be instilled. What training and certification should be obtained. So then this section talks more about the gathering and spatial planning. Since physical distancing is mandatory and probably will be for a while, currently defined by OSHA as 6 feet, we're really gonna have to be creative with how we serve our public and our consumers of our products and services. So gathering policies, you'll see just different considerations to be made. Eliminate or limit visitors, require management approval first is a consideration you can make. Consider overlapping staff, staggering people where possible. I think the idea and the recommendation is still as much as employees can work from home to work from home. That was a commonly echoed sentiment. Screening, tracking, and tracing. So this kind of puts employers in an interesting position. Hannah can probably speak more to this coming from a medical field, but again, we don't know what requirements will be made of us, and some of us employers will want to take the utmost caution, but you know, this does break down screening, tracking, and tracing, and what by definition that looks like, what the Washington State baseline recommendations are, and then also what employer best practices could look like from information gathered from this group. But this is where we start talking about, you know, logging workers and volunteers that are on site, you know, tracking for 28 days, who's coming and going. What does the screening look like? Are you performing temperature checks or not? All considerations to be made. Screening implementation. This is where they talk a little bit about, you know, what you could consider for screening. Again, is it all workers, all volunteers, all visitors alike? Self-reporting, on-site screenings. Create trust with your employees and be very transparent about what data is collected, why, and how to be kept. There was a good amount of conversation surrounding what is kind of HIPAA related types of things as far as who and how you would report who might have been exposed to COVID or has tested positive. So a lot of the resources built into this toolkit do address some of that and clarify some of that. Because this is a fact, we're going to be faced with the likelihood, many of us will be faced with that, and all of this pre-planning and pre-thought will prepare you for that circumstance should it arise. Symptoms on site. Again, kind of need to face this head on and really think about how you would handle that. What's your plan? What's, you know, there's timelines and procedures for notifying potentially exposed workers that you should have a plan in place. And then preparing the people, it needs to be addressed. And this is where I think that this group has done a really good job providing training materials and checklists, linking to a lot of the OSHA and other resources for guidelines. Here's train the trainer, who to train, topics to cover, training formats, building trust through communications, set the tone with communication from culture and business leaders. Be prepared that there may be a reopening plan, but that could, again, should the pandemic spread again, we may end up closing again. So just really proactively thinking of all of these contingencies. And then regulatory and privacy considerations. I spoke of this a little earlier. But there's some good resources to answer those questions and when and how you would refrain from disclosing the identity of an affected employee, and when it's required to notify a public agency. All things we probably haven't had to consider before. OSHA and other considerations. And then just a reminder that it's a rapidly changing landscape. And just communication, transparency, continue to evolve, be prepared, check the CDC and local guidelines on a regular basis. So this is pretty much a glimpse of the actual toolkit presentation that kind of overviews it all. I'll show you really quickly a few examples of some templates. So kind of that, where do we begin? And who do you sit, you know, which part of your management team do you sit down with to create some task forces? Again, just a great map that's ready to go that absolutely can be tailored to your organization. I think we'll find that other agencies will be coming up with similar things like this. I'll restate that today, the Chamber, with a keen eye on business resources, has really found this to be the most comprehensive plan out there right now. Who comes back first checklist. And different models to consider as well. I think this right here also allows you to plug in the very specifics of what your social distancing measures would look like, what your PPE requirements will look like in a phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 rollout. again, really taking it to the nth degree and looking at your actual physicality of your office space, maybe coding certain areas as being open at certain times. I know a lot of, our government agencies are already doing things like this, but maybe some of us are not. And then there's a link here, I believe, to the Department of Labor and other OSHA sort of guidelines. So that, in a nutshell, I'll mention real quickly, this is also the company that what does it say? Disposable medical mask set of 50 is $44.50. What I haven't done is price the best prices out there. We have certainly, with some funds we've raised, accumulated some so that we can help some businesses that might need it immediately. And I would ask any of you businesses that do immediately need some of this for support to reach out to Lindsay at admin@puyallup-sumnerchamber.com. I think we have maybe 24 bottles of sanitizers, I think 300, 400 masks. We have rubber gloves. It's not a lot in the scope of everyone, but we have it there and want to give it to the community, and especially to those that may need it most, just already having such financial hardship. So there we are. That will conclude the part of rolling out this sort of toolkit resource. Thanks for your patience on that. Again, a video link of the entire presentation is available. But right now, I want to turn it over a little bit to Hannah, who will also share with you some other resources that we are aware that are out there, and also just talk a little bit about the pre-planning of how and why we thought doing something like this right now is really important.
Thank you, Tara. Let me share my screen. Can everybody see my screen? Am I on mute now?
We can hear you, Hannah.
Okay, thank you. Well, then I stopped sharing. All right, let me go back to 3. Okay. So we looked at a number of different things. You can see the Association of Washington Business, the Republican plan, the bipartisan legislative plan. So there are a number of different, we'll say multiple threads or organizations, professional organizations, state legislature that are looking at ways to get businesses back to work. What we discovered with the Republican plan is that appears to be more of a metrics-based. So what are the metrics to determine that we can reopen businesses once the businesses are reopened? Then what are the metrics whereby we measure that we have met success, shall we say? So that appears to be less of a roadmap as opposed to what Tara just presented. In terms of what she presented, that I would say, my understanding from Tara is that she actually listened to and or read the presentation prior to this morning's meeting multiple times. So just herself alone, she went through it many, many times. I did, as well as Brooke. Lori reviewed it. So this has been examined. Brooke and I also did an analysis in terms of impact on businesses. So looking at it from a pro and con. So sort of the business lens. Looking at it from an HR consideration perspective, also a financial burden. So this was not done lightly, shall we say. And also what Tara has said any number of times, that this is sort of a point in time. And it is fully appreciated that next week, that tomorrow, that there can be other recommendations. So the recommendation or the advocacy is done with full understanding that there are other organizations, many people on this call, that they have task forces and that they're looking at this. So it's just that it's sort of the best in class based on the close, vetting, shall we say. It's the best in class that's available today. And given that this is a fluid environment, that it is believed that it is set up for it has a tailored opportunity so that it can be modified and adapted as we go. So that it's not sort of static or formulaic, such that here's a plan and that's sort of the plug and play plan. So that's another reason why that it was adopted, is that it could be tailored and that it could then be modified as we go. So these are the other organizations that are working on current plans. We don't know what they look like and what they'll look like once that they are released, but we did want to make you aware that they are in development, shall we say.
Great. You bring me to another point I may not have emphasized enough. So many of you were on the call a week ago, last Thursday, when we had our lobbyist, Carolyn Logue, on the phone. And when she spoke of advocacy and what we can do now, that really preempted this sort of task force and this direction. And I think the thing that resonated the most with me is there are associations that have had serious lobbying efforts. And then there are businesses that are kind of flying solo, that really aren't organized enough with their industry to speak on behalf of their industry. And, this is a little bit of a case of, he who screams the loudest might get the most attention. And so I felt that this tool also could provide those industries, those small, like salons or just different agencies that, can demonstrate that they can responsibly reopen, and also attach this packet, or create their own sort of toolkit from packet to send to Governor Inslee, to send to our legislators, to say, please make consideration, this is what we're willing to do, and really just sort of help them so they don't have to reinvent the wheel per se. It's already there. They can sign off on it and send it off. So I guess another thing that came of our task force this morning is, our county council and Pierce County's Economic Development Department has, partnered with us on all of these teleconferences and has really been such a great resource for us. We all heard about the new amount of money that was filtered in to go out to the public. Well, I believe they have another announcement in that vein, and may also have something to say about some of the own resources they're pulling together that could look similar to this. So I don't know if that's a Betty, a Gary, or a Dave, County Councilman Morrell, but I'm going to go ahead and open it up to our county to hear sort of your perspective.
Why don't we let Councilmember Morrell go first?
Thank you. Oh, let's help with the unmute. There you go. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to engage and listen to all the individuals out there who are trying to make an impact on this time of this epidemic. So as far as Pierce County goes, I touched on it earlier today. The county has been given through the CARE Act, a portion of funds based on population. The acts that we follow were in all cities and counties above 500,000. So we were given an allocation of $158 million that we have to use on COVID-related items. In other words, we can't backfill our budget with it. So the executive put a task force together that met last week, and department heads came up with recommendations on what to do with those funds. So we're looking at 5 different buckets that those funds were allocated to. It is now up to the council to develop the ordinance that indicates, or we agree on how the funds are going to be spent. And one of those buckets is economic development. And so we're excited to see what we can do with those funds. I know Betty and Gary can chat a little bit about that. We will, on Monday, have the council as a whole discuss those funds, and hopefully by Tuesday we'll be ready to put an ordinance together, vote on it, and then allow Pierce County to use those funds. So I will now turn it over to either Betty or Gary and let them chat about their ideas, and then maybe come on afterwards and chat a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you. So as you know, economic vitality is our passion, and part of the CARES Act does, as Councilmember Morrell said, give resources. Part of it is for the testing and training emergency management piece. Part of it is for the community service needs, and part of it's for economic vitality, as well as other pieces of infrastructure. There are strict requirements of what can be done, so none of these resources can be used to backfill anyone's budget. None of these resources can be done to start a program that needs to be sustained in the future. And all of these have to be COVID related. So we put together a package that's a fluid package of proposals that provide a wide range of business resources for our community. And all of that would be done through leveraging both with chambers, with cities, with nonprofits to be able to go out and implement. One, to make sure we keep our businesses stabilized. So we've seen that with the loan program that's being very successful. And we're hearing tremendous need still. Not many of our small businesses have been able to receive any SBA or EIDL funding or the PPP, but if they have, it's been like tiny. It's not even enough to make a difference. So we're seeing those impacts, so that business stabilization is a key piece. And then the other piece, which kind of alludes to what you did earlier, Tara, with your presentation, is how do we make sure all of our companies are up and ready, and especially the profile of our companies that have been hardest hit. So we're prioritizing a lot of our programs for those companies that will need it most. And if you look at, just throwing an example out there, and this is all fluid, it could change. A council has the final vote on actually what gets appropriated in funds. And then as we're hearing gaps come up, we're trying to quickly figure out the best way to leverage those opportunities. And also all of these resources have to be spent by December 30th and implemented. So I think I missed that on the equation. So with that, so for example, we know that the retail, the food service and industry has been the hardest hit from our Pierce County. So some of those programs, and they're also the ones when they start to get up into full operation, the COVID requirements are going to have them have less table space. They also have to buy all of their, meat, vegetables, everything they need. So they have to have all that front loaded, and they also have to have all these new requirements. So figuring out how can we help in that process? Because if they all have to get re-inspected, we want to make sure all of our restaurants have equal footing to get inspected. So how can we help either with those inspections? Do we buy more time with the health department inspectors, or the way that there can be virtual inspections? How do we make sure, especially our smaller independents, that they are ready to go? Is it a grant program that once they get inspected, that if they have good or great or whatever their little ratings are, that they get the grant for the program? So just looking at a lot of really creative ways going across industries. We're also trying to figure out ways that Pierce County can help itself. So there may be something one of our manufacturing companies can do that would be a beneficiary for a small business community. There may be one sector of the business community that can help another sector. So we're really trying to, in that way, that so there's a lot more coming. And until out there yet, and both Meredith and Ryan and Tara and others will be part of that implementation plan, because it's going to take all of us to make it work. Our goal is that Pierce County is the most successful in implementing small businesses coming back into the next normal, as we say, and being successful in business. And we want to just make sure we're ahead of all those opportunities, since we know it's really tough out there. And we are talking to hundreds of business people, and the stories they're telling us, it's just breaking our hearts. So we're hoping that we can provide opportunity and leverage through those programs.
Thank you, Betty. I'd love to hear from City of Sumner and City of Puyallup as well. Both Ryan Windish and Meredith Neal are serving on this task force, participated this morning. I know Meredith already had some great ideas to kind of move some of that forward. And I know that Ryan also spoke this morning a lot about just the promoting businesses and how you're mobilizing a few folks to really help with that. So Ryan, do you want to speak of any of that?
Sure. Can you hear me? Great.
We can hear you.
All right. Yeah, in Sumner, we are meeting with our businesses weekly. And this last meeting we had on Monday, they formed a subcommittee to really get down to some of the details on how to promote Sumner, promote our businesses as a whole, looking forward. And the city's trying to also kind of figure out what our role is in that, because obviously we don't run businesses, own businesses. We're not, daily operations kind of thing. But this toolkit is going to be something I'm going to definitely send out connections to that, so they can be looking at that for ideas how to safely get up and running as we're allowed to. We're also talking about kind of an overall picture of Sumner, working with even our service providers. We have a good network there, and kind of how the whole operation might open up, and how we can promote Sumner as a whole, because we know that it's going to take a lot of promotion in terms of getting everybody familiar with Sumner again, right? It's been interesting just personally how habits begin to change, and if the habit is you go do something and buy something someplace else, that's not going to be helpful to businesses, and they also have to shift. And we've been talking about shifting to a more of an online presence, social media. Not that businesses weren't doing some of that already, but some of our downtown businesses in particular may be a little bit behind in that. And this is going to help push them into that next area. And then also, as we've all talked about, kind of looking forward to, this isn't over in a couple of weeks, couple of months. This is going to cause some shifts in how you do business and how you're resilient as a business. So we want to try to help our business community understand that and be taking strides in that direction. So we're trying to figure it out, and appreciate all the help and the chamber's help and their calls and the EDB. All of this has just been an abundance of resources. And I'll tell you, as I send out emails to my business community, what I hear on these calls is valuable, and they appreciate it.
Terrific. Thank you for that, Ryan. Meredith?
Thanks, Tara. Yeah, I definitely think one of the really big top of mind issues for us is that financial piece. And I really appreciate that the county is looking at how to boost everybody up. As you've been talking, and we've been talking to small businesses, I'm hearing again and again, very few are getting PPP money and EIDL money, and they're trying to figure out how to keep themselves afloat. But I think that stepping back from that and looking at that economic recovery piece is really important too. And really, we've been talking a lot amongst city staff for the last week or two about what does this look like coming out of this? How can we support our businesses and our community? I think consumer confidence is going to be one of the things that we really need to work on too, as we start coming out of this in a phased approach, helping people to understand how it's safe to interact with businesses in whatever this next normal looks like. So that's one of the things that we're definitely working on with our partners. We've started meeting with the Chamber and PMSA and We Are Puyallup and other groups that are working on either business support during this or reopening plans and what that all looks like. we started this city staff group that it's kind of operating like a think tank, and we're really looking at any and all ideas that might work. You know, some things that are kind of crazy, some things that might not be so crazy, things like allowing outdoor seating in parking areas, since we know that it's likely that restaurants, when they are able to come back to having some sort of seating, are going to have social distancing requirements and spacing between tables. And a lot of our smaller restaurants don't have the square footage. I mean, they might only be able to have 2 or 3 tables in that scenario. And so coming up with some creativity there. I've seen there's a town in Georgia that's doing that, looking at allowing parking areas and parklets in the outdoor spaces so that they can expand their footprint and actually serve a number of tables at the same time. Then we've talked about things like working with the chamber and PMSA to distribute toolkits and packets, reopening. I think that everybody's really overwhelmed right now with the level of information, and it's great that you guys have done the legwork on finding some systems. And so we're going to be talking about partnering on that to actually print those out and distribute them and get them in people's hands, not just in their inboxes, which are just, I don't know about everybody else's inboxes, but mine, it's very full right now. And with that, I will kick it back to you.
We appreciate that. Thank you, Meredith. Councilwoman Jacobson, did you have anything to add as well from the city of Puyallup?
Nothing, except we did pass some permitting changes where folks are going to be able to get their permits and not pay the impact fees up front to the city and wait until they get their certificate of occupancy. So we felt that was very valuable, and we were one of the first to be able to do that. So we were happy to do that. Hopefully we can get the school district to sign on. I don't know what their particular constraints are, but hopefully they'll also waive their permit, user fees until the certificate of occupancy is issued. So that's one thing we did at our last meeting, but it all has to be COVID related on our meetings. So I feel like, the staff is really doing the heavy lifting. So thanks, Meredith.
Yeah. So Lori, I might take advantage of this opportunity for you to talk a little bit about where these resources are. Oh, Dave, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to make one comment that since we have several of the cities online, I think you guys are aware that the cities under 500,000 were included in the last CARE Act package, and they will be receiving funds similar to what the county got, which will have the same COVID requirements. So it's not too soon to start planning on what you're going to do with those resources. So just heads up on that. I know Puyallup, I think it's 1.2 million. And then Sumner and all the way down to Carbonado will get funds. So that is coming down the pipeline. And so be looking at what your cities are going to do with those funds also. Thank you.
Excellent. I see that Lori did go ahead and put in our chat here where this toolkit is now residing. Lori, did you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, and for those of you who can't see, it's PuyallupSumnerChamber.com/back-to-work. And right now it is just the place where you can watch the presentation that we watched the other day. You can watch the full presentation there. You can link to the Back to Work Toolkit, which is at backtoworktoolkit.com. Right now, that's kind of all that's there, but we will be updating it. We may kind of slice and dice those toolkit elements to make it a little more palatable. Right now, if you download the toolkit, you'll get a very large zip file that is full of many documents. Tara showed you a few of those earlier, but I just encourage everyone to kind of keep using that page, and eventually we'll put some advisors and people in there that can help small businesses implement those steps as well. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Lori. So we'll use the last 5 minutes to just anyone who wants to offer feedback or share an experience that you're going through right now. We don't necessarily have a speaker today, so we all get to speak. And I see Rick may want to speak. I'll help you. There we go. Gotcha. You're good. Oh.
No, I
We're
did
double
at the same
doing.
time you did.
We did.
I just have a couple of comments from a different view. I happen to be in a unique position. I've had many businesses, but now I found myself as a landlord. And so I'm kind of in partnership with about 40 businesses. And some of them are struggling, some of them are doing okay. But my concern is I'm going to be building some space out. Today I heard that the Sounder people just leased 4,000 square feet, and they wanted to make sure they had 150 square feet per person. This is to build the Sounder station. This is downtown, very close to me. And I have some stuff that some space that I need to retool, if you will. And I want to know if there are building codes that perhaps are going to change, if there are guidelines towards the surfaces that are used. For example, should I forget putting carpet down and do hardwood on the floors? Should I have wider halls? The spatial density is obviously going to change. And I think I haven't got anybody that's given me any answers to any of this stuff. So I think maybe I'm ahead of it on the question, but the point is that I'm doing this with my tenant because whatever I do is for the tenant. And while it's great that we have pathways and arrows and all this stuff, which is very neat, I think this information is great. I'm hoping to do a little more than what I'm hearing out there right now, or at least not get caught to where I spend a lot of money and build out some space for a new tenant, and then 2 months later we've got to remodel because the codes have changed, because there are conditions that are different. I'm sure Dave Morrell has answers for me on this one, or maybe other people, but maybe the city has some stuff, but I haven't heard anything from the city. And so I'm just kind of winging it out here. I did make a call to the health department, but couldn't get through to where I needed to get. And I'm not sure if they've thought about that much because they're so inundated with all the other current issues that are going on. But I love the fact that we're looking ahead and we're trying to see how we're going to come out of it. But that coming out of it is in my case, I feel it's a joint partnership, and I want to be there to help. Does anybody have any answers?
I wish all landlords had the capacity to help. That's fantastic that you've got that hat on. Your
I didn't say I had the capacity. I didn't say I had the capacity. I said the willingness.
So you might want to tap into some of the funds, right?
Maybe. I don't like to borrow if I don't have to, but yeah.
Yeah. Any other comments to that, or in general?
Nobody has any help for me on that one?
Huh. I think Meredith's
I'll jump in for a second.
You're on your own, Rick.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Every time I see you, I'm on my own.
I'm recharging my crystal ball, so it's not functional right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Rick, I think it's a good question to ask. And I know I've seen some work that some architects are doing as they're talking about kind of like what the offices of the future will look like. I would say that right now, I don't foresee any code changes at the moment. But it certainly is something that I think looking further out, probably, more in the 12 to 18 month timeframe, that there probably will be more discussion around that. And I'd be happy to chat a little bit more with you offline, just looking at kind of what that looks like to be proactive in that world there, to space some things out. And
okay, well, thank you for that. I'm hoping to build something before then, but that's all right.
Sure.
Appreciate your help.
Absolutely. But we can, I'll definitely continue that conversation.
Well, we can talk about on the boats.
Yeah. Sounds like a plan.
All right. Anyone else? So I know this. Oh, go ahead.
I may have one other thing, and that is that I became aware. My son lives in New Zealand. One of his good friends lives here, and he's working at a place called the Maker Place. I don't know if you're familiar with that in Tacoma. And they have some 3D machines, and they've produced these kinds of masks, and they've and shields and things, and they've been passing them on to Good Sam Hospital, Madigan, and other places. And a source that I think they just got a grant maybe from the city, a small grant, but city of Tacoma. But if there are people that need them, I'm trying to open a door for East Pierce County. If there's demand in East Pierce County that's not being met, maybe these people might be able to help them a little bit. But if there is any of that, maybe you go to the chamber and they can contact me.
Yeah, that would be terrific. We'll add that resource. I know that there is going to be a need and there will be a shortage and everyone's on it. So we'll see what that looks like. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate you being here. We'll see what our news tomorrow brings us. If there is news tomorrow, I'm sure that'll help shape what our dialogue will look like for next Thursday. So thank you so much for your support. Anyone that wants to get this toolkit in a packet form, it sounds like the city may be helping us with that, City of Puyallup, but otherwise Lori's got it all ready to go. And we are happy to, at the chamber, help you implement it at this stage. All right, thanks so much.
Sarah.
Bye-bye.